Hello, patrons, and welcome back to Wisdom Wednesday. On today's episode, we're going to get caught up with the ever-expanding domain known as Lagos. Stick around. Alright, so I came back from Gen Con and vacation to an incredible explosion of contributions from y'all patrons. What I'm going to do today is kind of take a look at what everybody's putting together, okay? And one of the first things that came up when I looked in the Google Doc was the question of how long has Lagos been around? In a sense, I think we hinted at it, that it's been around for a while because there was a small Lagos settlement that was around, a hamlet almost, that maybe became a village, but at a certain point when Mooxhu took over is when the population really started to boom. So the question is, how old is Lagos? And part of this was looking at the contributions from all of you guys. So DoD Spec Ops and a few of you other guys have been contributing to like families and NPCs. Our fellow patron TopoMusicale went through some of those contributions and started to figure out, based on the generations in a family, how many different generations there could have been in Lagos. And I think that's an interesting thing to start looking at when we talk about how old it is. So I'm just going to kind of go through this with you, and I'm going to add it into the main Lagos doc under a history section. But the initial population, based on the Tudor story, was mostly from a caravan of maybe 60 to 100 people. The marriage rate for adults in a given generation was, say, 70%. The average number of children produced by each married couple was, let's say, 3. The percentage of population growth from immigration over the course of a generation, 20 to 30% conservatively, but that's kind of an initial starting point. So TopoMusicale went into kind of some amazing factors to consider when we build this little town. So backtracking through history from what initially started as a small settlement and grew into a hamlet, and then grew from there into a village, and then became the town, which is now a regional magnet. So with all of that in mind, and seeing the target population of 6,000, and now I just grabbed that in the very beginning of this whole thing from the DM's guide, because I looked at towns and they give you a range, and I figured, let's make this a big town of 6,000 people that could, in a campaign, grow to become even a city. Or if things go really badly, it could get half destroyed and then the population's half wiped out. So, but in TopoMusicale's notes, with a population of 6,000, he estimates that Lagos is between the 7th and 8th generation. And what that means is, given 20 years per generation, so you're looking at about 150 years old. Now, TopoMusicale continues with this analysis, and I love this stuff. There's this nerd part of me that is very big into family history, and some of you know I've had discussions with DoD Spec Ops about family history and the difference between tracing your ethnology, where your people come from, and your DNA, right? Your DNA might contain traces of things that you never even knew existed in your family because it goes back thousands of years. But I'm into this stuff. I'm into genealogy, I'm into ancestry, not just my own, but like other people's histories. So TopoMusicale adds in this awesome analysis of what that 150 years of Lagos could mean. So the first part he brings out is that the oldest current human inhabitants may have known a great-grandparent who was an original settler. But all the stories that they would have about the original Lagos would be second-hand or third-hand. So you got to think about 150 years. You know, there wouldn't be, in the human population, there wouldn't be anybody alive, but maybe a great grandson or daughter would a descendant would be alive. 150 years is less than half of a dwarf's lifespan. So most older Kragspear dwarves will remember the initial founding of Lagos and maybe participated in the fighting that occurred. The younger half of the dwarven community would only know of those times secondhand. So that's a huge difference, right? Imagine that six generations, 7 generations go by in human populations, but there are still dwarves walking around who were alive and active when Lagos was quote-unquote discovered, when it was founded as an initial settlement. That's pretty amazing. What does that memory, what was that collective memory like for those dwarves? What insights does it give them about each of those human families? What insights does it give them about Lagos as a settlement and about the area around it, about the region? That could be huge. And then this is another cool one. So Topo continues to analyze this and points out that 150 years is less than a quarter of an elf's lifespan. So 3/4 of the Minarian elves will remember the founding of Lagos. The majority of all the elves in Minaria would remember the founding of Lagos and remember that first caravan that started up the settlement. Younger elves, about a quarter of them, might not know specifically about those times, but certainly would have a far larger memory of the human occupants of Lagos than even the humans themselves. So, you know, it's funny because as a DM, I don't often think about how the lifespans of races have that big of an impact when I'm looking at other people's games. And in a way, this has become other people's games. It's not other people's, it's our game. But I'm not the only one contributing to it. So because DoD and Topo and some of the other guys have contributed to this world, I don't think of it as just my game. Which is interesting, because I did think about lifespans and races a lot in other parts of my original world. So, for example, the Scree Kep, the avian race that live in my world, have a much longer lifespan than humans. And so do a few of the other races. But the Scree Kep are almost like the keepers of the continent's knowledge because of the fact that they have longer lifespans. So I think it's just interesting that based on what you guys have contributed, we're already getting into genealogy. And you know, I'll be honest with you, I picked up a box set from 2nd edition about the Forgotten Realms, and I looked through that thing, and you know, it wasn't that great. And in fact, even the collective gathering of knowledge about the Forgotten Realms that I find on like Wikipedia, or you know, there are just whole vast swaths of that continent and that world of Faerun that are not even remotely as closely developed as ours. So I think one of the things that I was saying before I got interrupted by the phone call was that the reason why I think this whole generational thing fits in quite well is because it creates a historical record that you can use as a DM, and that conceivably with a little work we could add in different eras into the historical timeline, meaning that you could actually run Lagos adventures when it's just a settlement. You could go back in time and play through adventures where the characters are maybe part of the original Lagos caravan, you know, the original settlement. You could play in the early days when Lagos was an established village, but before Mooxhu came. I think that's why this is really an interesting analysis that Topo has provided, because it opens up more possibility. And I don't think that a lot of game source books and content books actually do that. They typically write their world with a certain present timeline in mind. So I think that's something that we could do, or we could just leave this and then let DMs kind of reconstruct it as they want. But I don't think it would be hard to write a couple short adventures that take place in different parts of the timeline. So just a thought. You know, one of the reasons why I do the Wisdom Wednesdays sometimes is just to talk with you guys kind of in a more direct sense about what's going through my mind as a storyteller, DM, writer, whatever you have. And even from the perspective of a player, I think it would be cool sometimes to play through things in history. In fact, here's a little Wisdom Wednesday recollection. Back in the old days, in high school, I had a group of friends that I played with who weren't part of my original core group of friends. This was new friends that I made in high school who also played D&D. And one of these friends was very much into the whole like Arthurian Pendragon quest lore, right? And had read like all the different King Arthur books. So he ran a D&D campaign in that setting. And even though that's kind of pseudo history, I really got into it, and I thought it was really, really cool. And we actually played in the Uther Pendragon era, like before King Arthur's birth, and had a lot of fun with that. But I've also played in other kind of historical games, and I think there's a lot to be gained from role-playing in historical or historical fiction kind of settings, because it gives you a chance to go back and play through something and see how you would or could do it differently. So just some kind of geeky history things there. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just bringing together Topo's analysis and kind of adding that into the doc, because again, I think it's really cool to kind of have that in there. So that's kind of now, it's not finalized because I haven't written it out in paragraph form. I just took TopoMusicale's email of this analysis and added it into the main Lagos doc. So that takes us to the rest of the main Lagos doc, which a lot of it hasn't super changed too much. If you haven't seen it recently, DoD added some more information about the noble families, and we're going to get into some more extended family history with the noble houses. But right now we have the noble families are Salva, that's led by Claz Salva in the lumber industry. Tudor, led by Mother Triss Tudor, who they run the mill and the bakery. Wright, led by Lord Octavian Wright. They do farming and beekeeping. Garreau, led by Gaetan Garreau. They have the vineyards. Clement, led by Eli Clement. They do ranching and livestock. And of course, Carafa, led by Iso Carafa, running the warehouses. Still room for more noble families if we are so inclined, but right now that's a pretty strong starting point. And I think it covers like a lot of the primary areas of Lagos that we wanted to have that explain kind of these early pioneer families who really helped start Lagos before Manju. The trade and culture areas have not changed significantly. Same with religion, the racial tensions, the town traits, the inns and taverns. One note, you guys might remember the Slaughtered Pony, which was, that's an inn that we created without a lot of development. We haven't really gone there very much yet. We added a lot of information about the Roaring Horde and the Gilded Spirit, but the Slaughtered Pony was just kind of left to be its own thing. And the only thing we had mentioned there was that there was a secret society who meets in the wine cellar there. And our friend and patron Marie had added in a few suggestions for what that secret society could be named. One of those was the Black Hand, which I know a lot of people, including DoD, wanted to do, but we cannot and should not and will not use the Black Hand because the company White Wolf, who makes Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf and Mage and all that stuff, the Black Hand is actually an organization within the Sabbat of the Vampire the Masquerade game. So I would like to avoid any potential copyright infringement issues. So we're not going to use the Black Hand, but I'm definitely open up to the other suggestions that Marie had come up with, and I have some ideas for the next episode of Wisdom Wednesday where we could develop that secret society a little more and talk about what it means. So right now I'm kind of leaning more towards either the Crystal Mirror or the Blue Candle. The Crystal Mirror I have some ideas about because I think it could mean more than just the name of the actual secret society. I think it could actually be an object, a magical object that this secret society uses. So there's some ideas that I want to explore there. So the Google Drive, because of all the great contributions that everybody was putting in, the Google Drive was kind of getting out of control. And me being me, I'm a little bit of a neat freak, so I like to have things organized. So what I did was within the Building a Town Google Doc Drive folder, I made subfolders, and I moved documents into the appropriate subfolders. So if you go to look for something and you're like, where the hell's that thing? It's been moved. So if you take a look at it, that's what I'm looking at. Magic and Spells, Maps and Images, Minaria, NPCs, Sharlock Hills, and Cragspear Mountains. And then I left Lagos Adventure Ideas, and Project Overview in there. So basically, we have a little more structure now for the folders, and hopefully any new documents will be kind of in that structure. So one of the things that I wanted to do, though, is take a look at and talk about the maps and images. So DoD Spec Ops has gone full-on ballistic with making maps, not just regional maps and town maps anymore, but now we even are starting to have maps of specific locations. This is so awesome because so often when you buy a module or a source book, you know, they include a couple maps. I think one of the advantages of having a lot of maps is that for newer DMs, it gives them an idea how to visualize laying this out. It can also be a prop that they can actually print out or show to their players. Maybe they have it as a digital file on a screen they could show to their players. It could conceivably be scaled and used on a tabletop monitor if people have like a digital tabletop of some kind. Or if nothing else, they may want to take a map of a location and recreate it with dungeon tiles or terrain or what have you. So I think it's really cool. Let's just start and take a look. So Earthly Pleasures Shrine looks amazing. I love that there's multicolored pillows all over the floor because Earthly Pleasures. The government district within Lagos, that map, again, stupendous. Really shows kind of like a clean organization, maybe kind of where, some of the more important activities once characters start exploring might be taking place. He did Isocarafa's mansion, that main map of the area around the warehouses and his mansion. Then we have the big regional map, which now has been fleshed out a lot more. And behind the scenes, DoD has been working so hard and taking feedback from people about how to make the map. So it's gotten to the point now where I think that we're where we are gonna be with the maps because we need to kind of lock it in. And these maps kind of give us a good place to start. I like that he did the Lord's Manor and he has the first and second floors built in to that map for the Lord's Manor. So it gives you some ideas about how the manor is used, where people's offices are, but it also leaves some structure. So if you wanted, again, to take this map and scale it up, or to recreate it with dungeon tiles or minis and terrain, or just even draw it out, old school on a dry erase or wet erase mat, you can do that. So that's really cool. The Manarian map and regional maps are in place, and still a little bit of tweaking going on there. But really, I think the biggest contribution that I think you guys will dig is just looking at all the location maps, because that in the last couple weeks has just exploded. So the fact that we have a map for places like the Lord's Manor, like the government building main map, the Earthly Pleasures Shrine, the Weary Minstrel, all that stuff is awesome. So huge thanks to my man DoD Spec Ops for coming through with those maps, because they just help us visualize all this stuff so much better, really. The Manaria section. So in the folder of Manaria, I migrated 3 of the docs that were in there. The first was the creatures and races of Manaria, and a lot of you guys had added in things based on what we started with. So we have like a lot of the names for different NPCs, but also just different races that could be there. I really like the development with the centaurs. I think we kind of started that, and then you guys once again started adding on to it, which I really love. So it kind of fleshes out more to the forest, because Manaria is actually a bigger area than Lagos. So it would make sense that in that physical space that there are going to be more races. Some may be at odds, but a lot coexisting. And I think the centaurs, that community, and hopefully we'll get the satyrs in there as well, and some of the other races, will have that structure in place. So those can be NPCs that you could roll into an adventure when characters are adventuring around Manaria. It also kind of makes me think of Harry Potter, right? So if you're familiar with the Harry Potter series, there's more in Harry Potter than just the human wizards, right? And that's what helps make things in that world rich. You have giants, you have centaurs, you have the elves, you have like all the goblins, you have a lot of different kind of races in Harry Potter that really kind of make things interesting. So I like the fact that we're expanding on Manaria as well. A couple other things in the actual Manaria doc, we had some additions. So DoD came up with the titles, the leadership ranks and titles, but he also started kind of coming up with a little more fleshing out some of the NPCs. So he found some pictures here and has added some of those in. Now, to be honest, I love the pictures for us, for planning purposes, but without the rights to those pictures, we can't really use them. So right now they're just reference pictures. I want to make that clear for everybody. These are not pictures that we can publish unless we have the rights for them. They are reference pictures. But as reference pictures, I think they're great, because when we are at the point where this whole thing is written and all we have left to do is the art for it and the layout for it, then maybe we can have artists contribute original art for these character portraits. And that would be a huge leg up. I think it would really add a lot to our publication capabilities there. So I think it's great that for reference, DoD has added in these pictures of all these different kind of important NPCs. And a lot of the history there has been fleshed out a lot more significantly. So that is pretty huge. The fern galette, the mystical plant that behaves as a human does and senses emotion, can become playful or violent depending on the situation of the encounter. The plant can emit an odor depending on the emotions of the encounter, a scent of mild hallucination, poison, or other effects. That was just kind of a cool thing that DoD added in. So you guys remember we came up with the Moya fruit and talked about all of its different important components, both magically and like ritually and culturally, but also as a resource. And I think it was cool that we've added in more, because it would make sense that like a forest the size of Minaria would have more than just like one special fruit or one special plant. So that's kind of cool. As far as fleshing out the rest of Minaria, we do have House Quillanthri, which is kind of the big go-to for the leadership. But we also have the Dill Forest Gnomes. So you'll remember that, I started that doc during one of the episodes, and you guys have contributed to it as well. So again, we have some more NPCs that have been named and given ranks. So the Kurgali for the Dill, the High Council Lord, is Uldern Wheelcrank. And the Turgali are Setio Sparkriddle, Ericon Briskbang, Attic Quickstrip, and then the Tet Gate, the Magistrate, is Iten Finefizzle, and the Commander is Elonk Lightcup, and then the Captain is Billin Slippipe. So I like all those names. Those are totally a good fit for Forest Gnomes. And then we had the development of the bailiwicks. So those are the little enclaves where the families live. They're basically forest gnome villages. So we came up with that. I added those in, and I think you guys are starting to kind of flesh some of that stuff out as well. I do like the contribution. This goes back a little bit, and I want to explore it again. And that's PacNW. Anne, she contributed the idea of the Runoir, which is the Gnomes Fair. And I'd like to talk about in future episodes, and maybe just even offline collaborating with you guys. I'd love it if you guys would come up with kind of a structure for the Runoir. So Anne's note includes the following. The name comes from the gnomes' ancient language for the spring planting festival that drew many citizens, farmers, crafters from villages and bailiwicks around the forest and the region. It started as an annual springtime gathering, but over time became semi-annual spring and fall harvests. So I like that. I'd like to expand on it because I feel like that could be something that specifically could draw in adventurers. And here's where I'm going with this homework assignment. I need someone, maybe it'll be PacNW, maybe, if she wants to come and do this, or a couple of you guys to kind of collaborate on a short, low-level adventure, like a level 1 to 3 adventure that happens at the Runoir. So maybe a simple, mystery. Something happens at the Runoir and people aren't sure what happened, or it doesn't have to be diabolical, it doesn't have to be tied back to Mooxhu. Just a simple short adventure with a beginning, middle, and an end, and a little bit of mystery in there that kind of introduces a party to the gnomes, because I think an event like that is open enough where it wouldn't be suspicious for like a group of mixed-raced adventurers to show up amongst gnomes, because they welcome people when they have this festival. So I think that's a great intro opportunity and a great way to have a short intro adventure to their area. Okay, moving right along, because we have so much to cover and this video is already crazy long. The Charlock Hills and Cragspear Mountains. We have some development with the dwarves. Now, it's a little rough because we just put the outline together, okay? But a few of you guys, DoD, has added some of this stuff in here to help flesh this out, because the dwarves are still a big part of this region, and we haven't even really started broaching the subject yet. We have a lot to go. So DoD added this part in here. These mountainous dwarves have been in this region for a little over a millennium. Isolated, they mine day and night for precious gems and minerals that they trade between their clan and occasionally drifters if they're so inclined. Social skills are not part of their assets. So that was DoD's idea, and part of me likes that, but I want to flesh that out even more. So remember that between the two dwarves, we have dwarves that are maybe a little more interactive with others, and then we have dwarves that are a little more reclusive, okay? DoD has taken the liberty of adding a crap ton of information to this document, so I really would like you guys to read it. To begin with, he started with the Cragspear dwarves and has put together an entire outline of NPCs, including their positions in the culture, and even has some reference pictures and the names of the NPCs to go along with it. So I'm going to read through a couple of them. I'm not going to do the whole thing because I want you guys to go and check it out yourselves. It is in the Sharlock Hills and Cragspear Mountains folder under the dock, the dwarves. So the first thing is that DoD came up with this idea of Cyrox and Womus, who are legendary sorcerers from a distant land. That kind of creates, I don't want to say gods or demigods, but basically really legendary kind of characters, which is cool because that identifies some kind of structure beyond just like Mooxhu and the Lagos region. It creates these two people who may or may not be always doing things in the best interest of the entire region, or may or may not be exclusively connected to certain dwarf clans. So I think that's kind of a cool thing. The process of the Cragspear dwarves has been massive. So we'll start with the clan leader. So we have Gruff Ulvrich. He's a 254-year-old stout dwarf. He has a heavy hand when it comes to politics, a military background, and he's seen many seasons and many battles. His old ways keep in check all of the clan's businesses and expeditions. Council elders. Burner, son of Ukiorg Cloudroar and Srim Fuzbray. Tormir, elder of Old Faith and previous confidant of Ragdor Cragcoat. Oh, by the way, Ragdor Cragcoat was the previous Cragspear clan leader. So I like that DoD also set up a little bit of a genealogy pool here with the dwarves too, or at least some political history. Then we have Thordor, who is the eldest council member. He's over 300 years old, known as the All-Knowing. He has served on this council long enough to have seen 3 clan leaders in his lifetime. He is favored by all of the Cragspear dwarfs. He offers much needed stability in all council meetings as he is wise and restrained. Then we have Grandor, who is an intellectual bookworm. We have Cardus, who is the son of Vug Lowarm and Ual Rolls. A military expert in his own right. Then we have some healer and shaman types. We have Nasora Greytoe, who's a female healer cleric and uses the old ways of ritual healing. We have the gem cutter Jorhelda Whitebrow. We have Thrugnim Flatforge, the forge and armorer. We have Umkum Varg. We have Doldrum Bjornhammer. I mean, the list goes on and on. So he has this entire roster of NPCs with reference pictures. Okay, what we need to do is take a look at that as a group and maybe start coming up with some adventures and hooks in the same way that we did with the elves and with Mooxhu. So just within the dwarves, there are politics. Just within those dwarves, just within the Cragspear, community, there's going to be some intrigue, maybe some competition, some maybe, vying for power, right? So there are a lot of opportunities there for adventures and adventure hooks. All right, then he moves on to the Green Hills Dwarves. And he's got a bunch of NPC names there. Those are not as fleshed out as the Kragspear ones, but he's provided us with a great list of male and female NPCs that we can then flesh out. So just thank you so much. I can't even believe how much this has grown, has exploded in the last couple weeks. So we have a lot of work to do. And I'll tell you what, people, sometimes having a lot to do can be intimidating. So rather than feeling intimidated by how much there is to do, just take one tiny little piece and morsel and add your own little piece to this. Because I would love nothing more than to list and credit every one of you patrons who's contributed to this. That would be awesome. So let's keep doing it. Let's keep building it. Now that I'm back in school, I'm going to have actually a little more structured time where I can sit down and go through the docs and start fleshing out more stuff. And we're going to get there. So thank you again to all of you guys for making all of this stuff possible. And as always, if you have any other suggestions or topics or questions that you want me to talk about in Wisdom Wednesday, or any ideas or specific things that you'd like me to bring up during one of the Feedback Friday sessions, please don't hesitate to ask. And we will see you on the next episode. So, peace out.